In 2012, archaeologists uncovered a skeleton beneath a parking lot. What they found didn't just confirm Richard III's identity, it challenged everything we thought we knew about his story. For more than 5 centuries, Richard III had been remembered as one of history's villains, a monster king, a murderer, a twisted figure whose physical deformity mirrored a corrupt soul. But bones, unlike stories, do not exaggerate. And when science finally met legend, history had to pause and listen. The crooked king myth vs. man. For most people today, the image of Richard III is not shaped by medieval documents or archaeological evidence. It is shaped by theater. Shakespeare's Richard is one of the most enduring villains in Western literature. Crook-backed, cunning, coldly ambitious. A man who murders his way to power and delights in his own depravity. It is a performance so powerful that it has defined Richard's reputation for centuries. But Shakespeare was never trying to write an objective history. He was writing for a Tudor audience. When Richard was killed at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, England's ruling dynasty changed overnight. Henry Tudor seized the throne by force and founded a new royal line. His claim to kingship was fragile. Bloodlines were unclear, loyalty was uncertain, and the easiest way to secure legitimacy was to destroy the reputation of the man he replaced. The Tudors did not merely win the war, they won the story. Chroniclers aligned with the new regime portrayed Richard as unnatural, deformed, and morally corrupt. Physical difference became moral evidence. Political violence became personal cruelty. Over time, rumor hardened into accepted truth. A king who lost was transformed into a monster who deserved to lose. The charge that would haunt Richard most deeply was the disappearance of his nephews. The young princes who vanished from the Tower of London. With no bodies and no witnesses, suspicion settled neatly on the man who benefited most from their absence. Over centuries, accusation became certainty. Yet even in Richard's own lifetime, his reputation was not so simple. In the north of England, where he governed before becoming king, records suggest a capable administrator. Legal reforms attributed to his rule point toward efficiency rather than chaos. Some contemporaries described him as decisive, even fair. These contradictions never fully disappeared. They lingered beneath the surface, ignored but unresolved. By the 20th century, a small group of historians began to question the traditional narrative. They re-examined sources written decades after Richard's death. They compared hostile accounts with administrative records. They asked an uncomfortable question: what if the story we inherited was shaped more by victory than by truth? Still, without physical evidence, doubt remained academic. History favored the loudest voice, not the most cautious one. Then unexpectedly, the past returned, not in ink or parchment but in bone. Lost King found the unbelievable discovery. The rediscovery of Richard III did not begin with a royal tomb or a cathedral excavation. It began beneath an ordinary car park in the city of Leicester. Centuries earlier, Richard had been buried hastily in the Church of the Greyfriars, a friary later dissolved and demolished. The site disappeared under urban development. The king's grave was lost to memory, but historical maps suggested the location might still be traceable. Against considerable skepticism, archaeologists began digging. What they uncovered was a human skeleton, buried without ceremony. The position suggested haste. The bones told a story of violence. At first, there was no certainty this was Richard. Medieval England is full of unmarked graves. But then details emerged that demanded attention. The skull showed signs of severe trauma, multiple wounds consistent with bladed weapons, evidence of a violent death in combat. Then there was the spine, a pronounced sideways curvature, scoliosis, unmistakable and significant. Not the grotesque hunchback of legend, but a real physical condition that would have been visible in life, yet manageable. For the first time in centuries, myth and material reality began to intersect, and the investigation was only just beginning. Lost King found, science confronts the legend. When archaeologists lifted the skeleton from the soil beneath the Leicester car park, they did not yet have a king. They had a question. Medieval England is filled with anonymous dead. What mattered now was not discovery, but identification. And identification would require patience, restraint, and science. The bones were transferred to a laboratory, where forensic examination began. Every fracture, every cut mark, every irregularity was documented. This was no ceremonial burial. The body had been thrown into the ground hastily, without care, without armor, without dignity. The skull told the clearest story. Multiple injuries were visible, inflicted by bladed weapons. Some wounds were clearly fatal. Others appeared to have been delivered after death. The final violence of a battlefield where mercy was neither expected nor offered. This was not the body of a man murdered quietly in the shadows. This was the body of a king who died fighting. The spine became the next focal point. Detailed analysis confirmed scoliosis, a lateral curvature of the spine that would have caused asymmetry in the shoulders. It would have been noticeable, but it would not have made walking impossible. It would not have twisted the body into the grotesque shape described by hostile chroniclers. Armor could conceal it. Clothing could balance it. The physical monster of Tudor imagination simply was not there. Still, physical traits alone could not confirm identity. That confirmation came through genetics. Researchers traced the maternal line of Richard III through historical records to living individuals, separated by more than 5 centuries. Mitochondrial DNA was extracted from the remains and compared with these descendants. The match was conclusive. At that moment, speculation ended. The skeleton beneath the car park was no longer anonymous. It was the Richard III. With identity established, the bones became a historical archive. Isotopic analysis of teeth and bones revealed details impossible to fake or exaggerate. Chemical signatures showed a diet consistent with noble status, and later, with kingship. After his coronation, Richard's diet changed measurably. Richer foods, greater access to freshwater fish, imported wine. These findings aligned precisely with what written records suggested, but could never fully prove. Science did not replace history. It verified it. Health markers revealed a physically active life. There was no evidence of chronic disease that would have debilitated him. His body showed signs consistent with riding training and combat. This was not a ruler hidden behind palace walls. This was a man accustomed to the demands of leadership in a violent age. Perhaps the most powerful moment came when the skull was used for facial reconstruction. Layer by layer, muscle and tissue were added digitally. Measurements followed anatomical rules, not artistic imagination. Skin tone, eye placement, and facial structure emerged slowly, guided by evidence rather than bias. The face that appeared was neither heroic nor monstrous. It was human, asymmetrical, serious, reserved. For the first time in 500 years, the public could look at Richard III without Tudor filters or Shakespearean exaggeration, not as a symbol, but as a man shaped by circumstance, ambition, and survival. The Reconstruction did not absolve him of political ruthlessness. It did not answer unresolved questions about his reign. But it shattered the visual mythology that had dominated his memory. The bones had done what no chronicle could. They argued back. Bones do not lie, rewriting history with science. The implications extended far beyond one king. For centuries, history had relied heavily on narrative, on accounts written by those who survived, those who ruled, those who won. Richard's rediscovery forced historians to confront a difficult truth. Repetition does not equal accuracy. When physical evidence contradicts written tradition, something must give. In this case, it was certainty. The discovery did not rewrite history in the sensational sense. It refined it. It exposed exaggerations. It separated propaganda from probability. It reminded scholars that history is not static. It evolves as evidence emerges. And it raised an unsettling question. If one of England's most famous kings could be so thoroughly misrepresented, how many others remain trapped inside stories written by their enemies? Beyond the bones' power, propaganda, and a reclaimed legacy. The discovery of Richard III did not simply add a footnote to English history. It exposed the mechanics of how history itself is constructed and distorted. For more than 5 centuries, the Tudor version of events dominated England's collective memory. It shaped paintings, school books, theater, and popular culture. Richard was remembered not because his reign was uniquely brutal, but because his defeat made him vulnerable to narrative control. The archaeological evidence did not prove that Tudor chroniclers lied about everything, but it demonstrated unmistakably how selective emphasis can harden into accepted truth. Physical deformity was exaggerated into monstrosity. Political ruthlessness, common in 15th century England, was framed as uniquely evil. Silence and uncertainty were filled with accusation. The bones disrupted that certainty. They revealed a king who died violently in battle, not skulking in shadows. A body marked by combat, not cruelty. A physical condition that existed, but was weaponized by those who came after him. This forced historians to re-evaluate more than just one reign. It challenged the late Plantagenet period as a whole. For decades, this era had been viewed primarily through a Tudor lens: chaotic, corrupt, and destined to be replaced. But the rediscovery of Richard reignited interest in governance, law, and power during the 15th century. Administrative records, legal reforms, and regional governance were re-examined with fresh eyes. What emerged was not a rehabilitation narrative, but a more balanced one. Richard III was neither saint nor monster. He was a medieval king operating in a brutal political environment, shaped by civil war, dynastic insecurity, and constant threat. His actions must be understood in context, not caricature. Perhaps the most profound impact of the discovery lies in what it represents for historical inquiry. This was a moment where science confronted story, and was taken seriously. Archaeology, forensic anthropology, and genetics were not treated as curiosities, but as essential tools for understanding the past. Narrative history did not disappear, but it lost its monopoly. Evidence gained a voice. That shift matters far beyond Richard III. It reminds us that history is not finished. That long-accepted stories can still be questioned. That certainty should always be provisional. The public response to Richard's reburial in 2015 reflected this change. Thousands gathered in Leicester to witness the return of a king to dignified rest. It was not an act of apology, nor of absolution. It was recognition. Recognition that even the defeated deserve to be understood, not merely judged. Today, Richard III's story remains open. Scholars continue to debate his role in the disappearance of the princes. New interpretations emerge. Old assumptions are challenged. His legacy is no longer fixed, and that may be its greatest transformation. History, when examined honestly, resists closure. The bones beneath a parking lot did not give us simple answers. They gave us better questions. They showed us how power shapes memory, how victors write stories, and how evidence can still speak centuries later. If you want more stories where myth is tested against material proof, where time itself becomes a witness, subscribe to Time Teller Chronicles. Here, we do not repeat history, we examine what time has left behind.